Good morning. Can I be heard? Great. Thank you. Morning. So it's 9:57. We'll give it a few minutes. And can you see my screen? Excellent. And a question to the organizers: Will the session is recorded? I already saw that. Thank you. So I'll not be looking at the chats today. I won't have an opportunity to because I have a split monitor setup, and as soon as I look at my presenter view, I can't see you all. I'm sorry for that. And if something needs to happen, I do have my headphones on, so I'm sure the organizers, they can send me a message. Thank you, Andre. So before we start, in the meantime, congratulations, Thomas, with your daughter Charlotta. It was a great picture that you sent me. Thank you for that. And also, I'd like to. I wrote a book recently, which is mentioned in the chat here, a field guide to digital transformation. And I also saw that a few of the reviewers are in the audience. So this is my opportunity to say a personal thank you. And Anna, just let me know when we can start. All right, it's time. Let's start. Let me quickly switch screens. And I'm good. All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you and welcome to my presentation about business capability maps for enterprise design. Actually, to be more specific, for strategic, sustainably adaptable enterprise design. And to illustrate that it shouldn't read agile enterprise design, but adaptable specifically, I'd like to think about this. A rabbit is agile and an octopus is adaptable. It's just a thought. And I don't think we're looking for organizations that can run away really fast. So I think that illustrates adaptable is preferred. Before we start with the introductions, I really need to emphasize that what we discussed today is not the solution to our problems, nor it's not a complete description. We'll discuss a potential solution for a common set of challenges, and I'm sure that other solutions exist, and I'm sure that more is said about it or can be said about it. We just don't have the time. So let me first start with introducing the Volksbank. We're the fourth largest Dutch national bank, or retail bank with 4 complementary brands with corresponding complementary target customer demographics. We serve these customers with an omni-channel, multi-brand and single platform approach, and we use business capability maps as a means, or actually as part of the strategy for realizing mission and vision. Our mission statement is very simple, but we don't take this lightly. We wish to create the strongest customer relationship, and we wish to become the bank with the best proven social and sustainability impact. And to illustrate that we're really serious about the strong customer relationship, I think we're the only Dutch national bank who are actually expanding their physical branches a lot, which has become a distinguishing factor these days in the marketplace. So today I'm not here as a representative from the Volksbank, but independently. So I'm not speaking on behalf of the Volksbank. And that means that I'm free to just talk about things that have my passion, which is a lot of fun, I guess. In this presentation, we'll be figuring out how to design an enterprise in a way that gives autonomy and decision power low in the organizational hierarchy, while it still supports the strategic goals. So how do we give freedom to take responsibility and ownership to support an organization's strategy? On the mandatory me side, I'm Roger Stoffers, 50 years old, married 26 years. We have 2 children, Niels and Nina. We also have a dog, which is smart, and an incredibly funny Labradoodle, Rudy. There's a picture of Rudy here, and just so you're not getting confused, Rudy is the one with the hair. And another way, knowing who's who, that Rudy looks sharp and focused, and I don't. Presently, I work at the Volksbank 4 days a week. Also, I'm an independent contractor at Sure Result, on average the remaining day. I work with and for organizations like Architectura and Transformative Digital Solutions in Canada and Jordan in the Middle East. And I'm also an advisor to Intersection Group. In my professional history, I worked for many organizations as an employee with Philips and Vodafone, and as a consultant architect in EDS and then HP Enterprise. In the end, we merged with CSC to become DXC Technology. Anyway, just the normal struggles of working in a large organization, I guess. You get all kinds of identity crises. And identity is a key word today. So let's figure out what that means later on. I've worked in many roles, started as a developer, became systems architect, tech architect, solution, principal integration architect, and ultimately EA, which is a really fun job, and my current role at the Volksbank. I've worked in telco mostly, but also in government, chemicals, oil and gas, and since 4 years, I'm active in retail banking. And please allow me to make a shameless plug about a few publications that I was involved with. I contributed to a book about analysis and design for services and microservices, and recently I co-authored the book A Field Guide to Digital Transformation with Thomas Earl, who is an established Canadian author in the space of SOA, cloud, microservices, DevOps, digital transformation, and many more topics. Also allow me to mentioned this book. I really like to ask attention for it, Enterprise Design Patterns, which is a good resource on enterprise design by the Intersection Group. And just so we're clear, and that's common with many patterns, I guess, is I will not be presenting rocket science today. I will be discussing about things that I proudly found elsewhere. I just compiled them in a specific way to synergize. And some of the design patterns mentioned in the book materialize in the presentation. So let's go to the content for which you have attended today, and let's find out what we're trying to solve. Many organizations create their organizational structure based on assumptions or a coarse-grained functions ordination. And when looking at organizational structures I've encountered, I tend to think it's often not done by enterprise designers. It typically happens behind closed doors by senior executives, and sometimes they're helped by expensive consulting firms. Now, these designs, they look amazing, they're gorgeous, but when looking better at them, it's not always, but often, they are based upon a hierarchical structure. And at the same time, the big shuffle starts, where participating leadership team members start protecting their own kingdoms. This is where they want to make sure they have certain systems or teams or people in their court, and it's all about keeping control, I guess. So before the actual organizational structure is settled upon, often many compromises are made in order to keep everyone happy. This can, of course, lead to suboptimal organizational structures, which are not in direct support of the strategy. These organizational changes and fierce restructuring usually happens every few years, when there are new strategic goals or focus shifts, new people on board in decisive positions, or when it's clear in general that the previous restructuring didn't work. And when you subsequently look at the enterprise IT landscape over time, interesting things happen. As a result of that professional process that we mentioned, and it's not the only reason, organizations create what is known as spaghetti architecture or a spaghetti application landscape. And this illustration may look nice, but it often looks more like this. And I don't think that's what we want, I believe. So let's go back to the pretty picture and go from there. So in an entangled enterprise IT application landscape, there are questions to ask like, well, who does what? Who's responsible for what? Where do I make certain changes? Which impact is where? Those are all interesting questions, but the conclusion can be that almost always there is more work than anticipated. So making changes in such a landscape is similar to this plate of spaghetti. If you try to take a strand to chew on, either nothing is on your fork or you get a lot more than you've bargained for. So because of this back and forth and because of the constantly changing rules of engagement between teams, overly large, seriously complex IT landscapes can be resulting. And let's take a look at this illustration. I'm not saying this is your landscape, nor mine, nor any place I've ever worked with. But the big concern is that the organizational structure and the organization's abilities are often not aligned. So you get structures in IT that may perhaps work for a department, but not in cooperation with others, and duplication and unnecessary complexity can be a result. And let's take a slightly deeper look into the relationship of organizational structure and the resulting IT landscape. And in order to understand this, we need to understand a famous adage, which is an observation done in the field by Melvin Conway in '68, which is commonly known as Conway's Law. He was a programmer, and his observation was this: any organization that designs a system will produce a design whose structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. And his dissertation uses this example that if two teams design a compiler, then the communication structure of the compiler is similar to the social communication structure of the teams. So in other words, similar to the organization structure. So two teams designing a compiler would lead to software becoming structured as a two-step compiler. Now, back then people were skeptical, but these days it's mathematically proven that software structure mimics the social communication structure in an organization. Now, you may be tempted to think that this social structure and organizational structure are the same, but they rarely are. So if an organization thinks they have a nice hierarchical structure on paper, but in real life it looks more like this, well, I guess we're in trouble. One other concern is that such a hierarchical design of the enterprise structure rarely takes into consideration that processes exist that span departments, and it's key that these processes are owned and executed and measured coherently. Splitting up such a process across departments immediately triggers responsibility discussions, and it's a recipe for finger pointing. Now, of course, Melvin Conway's system consisted of only two components, and a large organization usually consists of many units, departments, people, etc. So the challenge we have in enterprise design is far more complex than a two-step compiler, but the principles, they are the same. Now, if we apply Conway's law to an organization structure, which is also a system, and if the organization structure is suboptimal, its functional performance in the organization will also lead to suboptimal results. And that leads me to believe that if we can reverse apply Conway's law, we can use the organizational structure as an instrument to make a better functioning business. So there is something we can do. The big question is what? Let's assume that today you and I get the say on what that new structure should be. And we should propose that the newly designed structure requires that run, change, improvement, and strategic development of a piece of relevant functionality is in the same hands. And that requires decentralized ownership and decision-making. Now, that does sound challenging, right? Probably yes. But is it a strange thought? I don't think so. Some organizations call this the single responsibility principle. Others call it autonomous teams, which may sound familiar for people using agile frameworks like SAFe, or who use DevOps or Holacracy, or all of the above, I guess. And this, however, requires a fine-grained approach, not the large business function approach that many organizations may have. And in the next 10 minutes, I will show an alternative design approach for organizations, which hopefully addresses these concerns: adaptability, so we can respond to market changes, aligned with strategy, specialized and effective where it matters, and efficient where there's no strategic focus. Let's see how to tackle this. So from the bowl of spaghetti, we've established that often the amount of work for change is larger than expected. And large changes are like big rocks. They are very hard to change, very hard to move. This could be my dad, by the way. Good luck, Dad. Keep on pushing. Even if we manage to move them, it requires specialized equipment and a careful approach, and it's hard. And large changes come to life slowly, so we need a different approach. So instead of moving big rocks, we need to work towards a situation of managing smaller rocks or smaller changes. You may ask, how does this improve things? Well, with smaller rocks instead of larger boulders, we need less effort and people, and the work can be done with simple standard equipment, and perhaps it can even be automated. And it's also more scalable. We can invite a few of our friends, give them all a shovel, a wheelbarrow, etc., and off we go as separate teams, and we get a larger number of small changes done more quickly. So the lead time and the relevance of changes can be improved, since it allows us to focus on those smaller things that matter. Now, Professor Verelst and Manhart, in their books about normalized systems, they talk about so-called combinatorial effects, sorry, can't pronounce that can be reduced by reducing the scope and responsibility of a component in the system. And the smaller the component, the less dependencies it forms on providers and consumers. So the less change drivers exist. And as a result, less cascading effects occur in an organization. Now, in the architectural thinking community, agility and adaptability is positioned as opposing terms, where a rabbit is agile and an octopus is adaptable. And we're not looking for organizations that are agile but can adapt to market changes, that can respond, and that can position and reposition themselves as needed with an identity that makes sense to them. So similar to the big and small rock analogy, a question I'd like to bring forward is, what if we could create smaller functional units of people and automation that are in support of strategic goals? What if we could do that rather than supporting large business units, product lines, silos, or perhaps individual managers? How do we create those smaller rocks? What type of enterprise design do we need for this? Now, in our book about Design for Digital, Jeannie Ross describes the notion of reusable business components. And what we really need is reusable business components. And these help us build an organization similar to Lego bricks that can be used to build an office building. And if so, an organization is built of Lego bricks, then what are those bricks? So let's assume that we can have functional Lego bricks representing reusable business components. And then such a brick would then be a team's responsibility. And we're looking for reusable business components that are significant to our mission, vision, organization goals, strategy, etc. If it doesn't fit with the strategy, it shouldn't be relevant. And these business components, they should be recognizable for business. This is us. This is what we do. Now, if a team already is responsible for a business component, nobody else should try to establish a similar component or parts of it. For an example, if we already have an employee skills management component and it doesn't offer all required functionality, then we need to talk to the team responsible for that component and make sure it's improved instead of building another version of it elsewhere. Now, if the team responsible for a reusable business component is assigned, then they should be responsible for everything, including functionality, effectiveness, efficiency, quality, etc. Assuming that the team consists of business and IT people in a DevOps approach, they should have the appropriate knowledge and skills to operate and improve such a component. And they should also make sure that the component can be easily linked to or communicated with by offering relevant and reusable integration options. Let's call these reusable business components, these reusable Lego bricks, business capabilities from now on, and let's see where that takes us. So what is a business capability? Now, I'm not proposing an exact definition here, but a pragmatic description could be something like an ability of an organization with a clear purpose, which provides value and helps achieving strategic goals. Now, here's an example of a business capability. In this case, it's customer ordering or customer order capturing, which is probably dealing with the capturing of orders for customers. And the business capability describes what the organization does. It doesn't show how, so you can't see any implementation details here. Not who, where it's realized, with whom, with partners, with software, etc. We don't show those details. So the ability, the business capability is an ability, something that an organization can do that has a relevant purpose, clear value, and contributes to the goals. Now, let's take a better look at the actual implementation. And we'll use customer management here. So this business capability is a coherent unit, and we'd like to decompose and view it from various implementation angles. The Lego brick, or the reusable business component customer management, is actually a coherent set of business processes managed by people and responsible and supported with automation. And it also creates information of which it's the master. It owns that information. It's created there. In this case, it's customer data. Now, please bear in mind that a business capability can use resources like buildings, oil and gas, electricity, iron ore in a factory, etc. And automation also, which can be software and computers, but also robots and other types of machinery. Now, assuming DevOps, the team consists of people from business and IT and is responsible for operating the processes, but also for improving them. So they are the team who executes the business processes and are responsible for build and run, as well as detect and correct. They're responsible for everything: execution, effectiveness of processes, efficiency, data quality, strategic fit, etc. We also need to understand that the team is responsible for strategic development of such a business capability. And if the capability is ineffective or it doesn't deliver the expected value, then the team cannot ask anyone else, as they are the only ones responsible. They can improve it, though, for better strategic alignment. A consequence is that this puts requirements on the team. They need to be a group of multidisciplinary people, similar to the A-Team. I'm not sure who remembers the A-Team, but that was an action series in the 80s with a team of people, each with their respective expertises. One for the plans, one for the explosives, one for his charm and looks, not sure what that contributes, and one, well, there was Murdoch for, I guess, planes, choppers, and for providing creative solutions. By the way, Murdoch is the one with the hat. It's the same for business capabilities. We need a multidisciplinary team with a collective mix of business and technology expertise and skills. Now, just looking at business capabilities on their own is not enough. When talking about capabilities, we also should discuss business capability maps. And the map is just a logical construct like business capabilities, and the map is just a collection of business capabilities. So here is another pragmatic definition. A business capability map is an aligned set of business capabilities collectively required to realize and support the strategy of an organization so that the organization can achieve its mission and realize its strategic goals. A Dr. Russell Eckhoff, with his contemplations about systems thinking, more than once said, if you take a car apart and you place all its components next to each other, it's no longer a car that you can drive. And a system is not the sum of its parts, but the product of its internal and external interactions. So take the car apart, it's no longer a car. Put it back together and you get extra synergy. And it's the same for organizations, and it's the same for the logical depictions of business capabilities and the map. A single business capability doesn't achieve organizational goals on its own. And all capabilities must be in relative alignment, not completely independent. Remember, it's a building, it's not a box of unassembled Lego bricks. So there is a plan on how they align. And business capabilities on the map, they are an aligned collections, loosely coupled, so they can cooperate where needed. And then they can function together in synergy to realize the organizational goals. Now, the capability map is actually the part of the strategy to do mission stuff. The organizational goals should reflect what the organization does, who they are, who they want to be, their identity, and how they wish to behave with that identity in mind. And the collected set of capabilities on the map should realize the strategic goals. The map only incorporates relevant business capabilities. So if something is not relevant to the goal of the organization, it shouldn't be on the map. An interesting observation is that if business capabilities explain what the organization needs to do, and if the organizational goals are fairly stable, this means that the map is also fairly stable. And that leads me to believe that we now have a fairly stable view in our hands that helps us improve what the organization does or should be doing. So if the map can be used to help understanding what an organization needs to do in order to realize goals, throughout many years, the map should be relatively stable. And we can classify these business capabilities on their nature. For example, one classification scheme could be, what is commodity? What sets us apart in the marketplace? What is distinguishable? We can now find relevant metrics that we like the team to report upon as well. For example, metrics like cost or complexity, lead time for changes, data quality, etc. But also, how well does it contribute to our collective goals? And should we perhaps improve it? And suddenly we have a tool that we can use for making blueprints and roadmaps aligned with our goals, and we can even measure it. And when we now look at sourcing, we might choose commodity capabilities to be sourced externally, like using business process outsourcing, or we can do IT sourcing with SaaS or COTS products, commercial off the shelf. Now, for capabilities that set us apart in the marketplace, so the ones that make us unique and extra attractive, we hope, we might build something bespoke ourselves, because you can't buy that. And with the business capability map and classification of the capabilities on it, we now have a tool that helps us understand where to focus investments and where not to. And for the people who are familiar with Lean, WIP limits, work in progress limits, is an interesting organization-wide metric. And there is only so much you can do. And if you know where to focus, you focus on the right things. You focus on where it's relevant. And after the current ongoing work in a sprint or in a quarter or a PI is finished, then the same prioritization exercise can be done again to figure out where to focus next. And if we repeat this process, we can always focus on the most distinguishing, on the most relevant changes. Now we will work towards the actual organizational design, and the good thing is it's quite simple and a pragmatic approach. Unfortunately, it's not so easy to realize it. On this slide, we assume that we have established business capabilities in our organization, which are the hexagons, and the map only has relevant capabilities on it. And next, we'd like to treat business capabilities as products, meaning operated by people and automation in coherence. The team is responsible for everything, effectiveness, efficiency, etc. And this puts requirements on the integrations. We should be loosely coupled, but also on the business processes managed. They shouldn't form unnecessary operational dependencies on each other. So remember that the team owns a capability and is responsible for everything, and they can't work in splendid isolation as well. So they are supported with enterprise architects, product owners to set priorities, strategic portfolio managers with coherent portfolio management, etc. But it's managed. And if we take that as a premise, and if a capability is owned by a team and positioned as a managed reusable component, then we've got 90% of the org structure in place. Should our strategy change, we might need to amend the map with different things. Sounds simple? Well, yes, and maybe that's oversimplified, but let's assume it's simple. And what happens then with adaptability in mind? So let's assume we want to start selling ice creams. We can logically accommodate this fairly straightforward. We need to add a capability that allows us to sell ice creams. And for agility's sake, we'll source that externally. So we'll partner with an organization and integrate with APIs. Next, we can add a mapping in order fulfillment. So order fulfillment knows which product in the shopping baskets are ice creams and how to connect to ice cream capabilities. And then we can add a commercial product definition, which includes pricing and eligibility, compatibility, etc. And that's also configuration. And the cool thing is we don't need to change order capture because it already knows from the configuration what it needs to do. So we can now put ice creams in our shopping basket and have them sent to your home. Now, I think we can do this in 2 weeks, provided that we get the testing done. And that sounds quite adaptable to me. So whatever organizational structure we choose, wrapping the team's management whatever organizational structure we choose, wrapping those capabilities, if the team is given trust and responsibility, standards, architectural guidance, etc., and maybe also some decentralized decision power, we can put all kinds of organizational structure around it, wrapping it. It's just of less relevance. So if you really need a strong hierarchy, be my guest. Although I wouldn't advise it due to the inherent inability to give decentralized decision power. If you need a functional grouping, be my guest. You could take the capability map, which is shown here as inspiration. Perhaps the large blue and gray boxes are the organizational departments. Or perhaps if you need another structuring, another functionally oriented structure, we can do this. Or maybe if you value your value streams, you do something like this. It doesn't really matter. It's of less relevance as long as we give autonomy to the teams. So the takeaway for today: spaghetti architecture leads to larger changes, which reduces the change pace. A few big rocks are harder to move than lots of small rocks. And in order to overcome this, we need to make smaller parts. We need to create a solid understanding of the organizational strategic goals, which are hopefully aligned with mission and vision. And at least they should reflect who and what the organization wants to be, their identity. We can create a capability map to establish what the organization must do in order to achieve the goals and omit from the capability map what's not relevant. We can focus investments by classifying capabilities and making sure that we only spend the money where it matters. And we can treat business capabilities like products, a cohesive unit, which cannot be split, which consists of people, processes, automation, and information. And hopefully we can organize in an effective working method like DevOps or holacracy to really give that decentralized decision power. And then we can make sure that the teams support those business capabilities. The teams are the business capabilities, really. And only then the remaining organizational structure around the capabilities can be made, making sure that the coherence of business capabilities as a smallest unit is never broken. And that leaves me with just one remaining question on my end. If business capabilities allow for adaptability, and this is what allows us to fly, well, are we ready to fly? Thank you.